we're doing is called pre-cooling.
Yeah.
And you've probably been listening to Craig Heller explain this to Huberman. He's like, he was doing per-cooling, extracting heat between sets during a strenuous workout. And Heller showed that if you cool the body, the mitochondria will increase their peak power output and they will not get fatigued. So cooling will help you reach a higher level of athletic performance. Now, we're not per-cooling between sets. We're pre-cooling the exercise. And here's what Heller didn't talk about. You get a big testosterone boost.
Yeah.
When men cool off first, and they don't have to do a strenuous exercise afterwards, then they do 20 minutes. It could be exercise bike. You go for a walk for half an hour. I like doing lunges. I like my steel mace. So a little bit of light exercise to rewarm the limbs. They get a big boost in testosterone. And this explains my lab reports because I've been putting them online now for 5 years. I'm a fat 59-year-old sedentary college professor, and my testosterone is over 1,000 nanograms per deciliter. So how do you think that happens? The testosterone is a reflection of your metabolism. Testosterone is made in the mitochondria. And this is what people don't realize, that all sex hormones originate in the mitochondria. So if your mitochondria aren't right, you can't possibly be synthesizing enough sex hormones to have a higher level of testosterone. Turns out there's a study, goes way back to 1991, in which they tried cold stimulation for recovery from exercise, just like, your high school track coach says you're supposed to do after practice.
Right.
That lowers testosterone. It lowers luteinizing hormone. Luteinizing hormone is what signals the gonads to make the testosterone. But if you reverse the order, which is what they did in 1991, if you do the cooling before you do the exercise, luteinizing hormone goes up through the roof. Testosterone goes up through the roof. So by reversing the order, you get the hypertrophy, you get the muscle building hormone, plus you speed recovery. Everybody, and this is a slight exaggeration, but everybody who hasn't been listening to Joe Rogan on this is still doing it wrong. And then, whether it's Thomas DeLauer or Peter Attia or BioLane or somebody, and they'll do a video, ice baths don't work, and they'll get 100,000 clicks because they're still doing the ice baths after the exercise. When you reverse the order, readers all over the world are sending me their labs and then getting this huge boost in testosterone, huge boost in mood, huge boost in energy because they're pre-cooling instead of cooling afterwards.
I've heard about this, but I have not witnessed this phenomena of people online saying ice baths don't work. Is the main reason they're saying it because it crushes testosterone and muscle hypertrophy?
You are on the right track. There's a lot online now that is bashing ice baths. We went for 2 years where Joe Rogan was saying, oh, Morosco's the best thing ever.
Yeah.
I get so much out of it.
Yep.
And he's right. But the pendulum has swung. There are some people who never want to get into an ice bath. And so, especially when Stacy Sims went on the Huberman podcast, she went on Stephen Bartlett's podcast, and then she went on Mel Robbins' podcast. Now, Mel Robbins has a Morosco. She's a customer. She loves it. She's posted about it.
Yeah.
But when Stacy Sims, with her PhD, went on Mel's podcast and said, well, I don't really like ice baths for women, Mel was like, thank you for telling me that. I feel like people have been pushing the ice baths maybe too hard. So there's this social media backlash against ice baths now. But look at the comments under the clips. And the clips have all exaggerated Stacy Sims' position. She's like, ice has a role. She even talks about how ice baths will help women overcome endometriosis. Like, there's a lot of benefits for women with ice baths that Sims acknowledges. She's just saying the women should start a little warmer. And it's fine. Start wherever you're ready. When you look at the comments under the headlines on Instagram or Twitter, they run about 50-50. Half of the comments are saying, I don't understand how ice baths could be bad for women. Ice baths saved my life. Ice baths rescued me from depression. Ice baths helped me lose 20 pounds. Ice baths have given me so much energy. I started doing ice baths and then I conceived a child. How could they possibly be bad for me? Then the other half of the comments are like this. I knew it. That's why I'll never do an ice bath. And I'm glad I've never done one ever in my life. There are people who don't want to do the really tough things. And they want to hear from social media that science or whatever is telling them, They don't have to do that. There's some other reason that they're unhappy or they're lethargic or they have some thyroid disorder or something else. And I don't buy into that. If a cucumber facial and a day at the spa was going to cure cancer, I would be writing articles about that. It just doesn't work that way.
Right. Now, you said that this stuff, when you specifically do workouts after you do like a cold plunge or do a cold bath, it boosts LH and follicle and FSH and increases overall testosterone like dramatically, no matter how old you are?
I have not measured the FSH. And the LH and the FSH have two different roles. If I'm remembering this correctly, the LH will stimulate testosterone production in the gonads, whereas the FSH is more responsible for sperm production. And those things are related, but they're also a little bit different. And I haven't tested FSH. I haven't examined sperm production.
Right.
For me, it was really an accidental discovery. I had a blood test come back with an elevated PSA. So I'm 59, but at this time I was 52. And a lot of guys will get their blood test, find that their PSA is elevated, and then there's a whole sequence of things that happens. First thing that happens is you go online and you say, what the hell is a PSA? You know, and why is mine 7 or whatever? It takes about 20 minutes online, and WebMD is going to convince you that you're going to die of cancer.
Yeah,
like this is what happened to me because I'm prone to these catastrophic thoughts. Then you're supposed to go to a urologist who will tell you your prostate is inflamed, then recommend a biopsy. In a biopsy, they will remove like 16 tissue samples out of your prostate. I'm not recommending this. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a PhD, and those are two different degrees. But it sounds like an awful experience, and the men that I've talked to who have been through it told me horror stories about how painful it was and the false positives that can result. So then they examine these tissue samples, and they say, well, is it cancer? The false positive rate is very high. And so you might have 9 come back cancerous and maybe the rest no cancer. And you say, well, I don't know. And then your urologist will say, as a precautionary measure, we should remove your prostate because it could be cancer. After you have your prostate removed, you will be incontinent, almost certainly, at least for some time, and you'll never get an erection again. So this is what happens in my head at the age of 52 when I have a lab test showing my PSA is too high. I'm headed for these painful surgical procedures and a lifetime of erectile dysfunction, and I wasn't signing up for that. I was recently separated from my wife, and I was thinking, what woman is ever going to love me? How am I ever going to have like a romantic life again if I go through with this prostatectomy and I can't ever get it up? So I said, I'm going to find some other way to do it. I'm going to use ketogenic diet and ice baths because both of those are good for inflammation. And I got into, at that time, it was a chest freezer that I got, from Kenmore. And it was this big, ugly, dirty thing. But every day I got into that because I was afraid I was going to die. It took me 4 months later. And in the interim, we'd invented Morozco, so there's a cleaner solution that makes its own ice. I go back in to get my labs because I finally got the courage to check again. And my PSA had dropped from 7 down to 1.8. 1.8, no elevated risk of prostate cancer. So I'm like, I've done it. I waited a few more weeks. I got another blood test. I got the whole male panel this time. 1.1 on the PSA. So I'm in the clear. Now I'm going to go to a urologist. I think I'm going to get a big pat on the back. He's going to be like, oh, this is a miracle. How did you do this? I need to know. He wasn't interested in my PSA. He didn't care. He's like, yeah, that's fine. What I'm really worried about is your testosterone reading because my testosterone was 1180 nanograms per deciliter. And the lab report flagged it. They put it in red. They said it's too high. It's out of range. My urologist is about my age. And he's looking at me and he's like, there's no way. He's like, I just want one more test. He thinks
you're on the roids.
Exactly right. He goes, there's no way. And at that time, most medical doctors still believed that increased testosterone levels would increase the risk of prostate cancer. I even had a friend who had a prostatectomy, and he was on testosterone suppressing drugs because his urologist was saying, we really need to kick the crap out of this prostate cancer. We're going to suppress your testosterone. Testosterone is anabolic. It promotes the growth of cells. And according to this theory, we should get your testosterone down until we're sure that you're in the clear.
Right.
My friend gained like 30 pounds, of course, because he was feminized. He was chemically castrated, essentially.
Right.
He felt miserable. He had no energy, but it's what his doctor told him to do. So at that time, I'm at the urologist's office, and he's like, this guy, this college professor, he's on the sauce. I want to get his luteinizing hormone checked. I didn't know what luteinizing hormone was. I got to go back to the lab. I got to go back to Google. I got to get another test. Comes back 8.9. I am off the charts too high. I'm in like oversexed 19-year-old territory with these sex hormones. So I send the report to my urologist. I never heard from him again. Like, he doesn't care about my PSA. He doesn't care about my testosterone. This is how little I know about, practicing medicine. What is he going to do? Change the way that he treats his patients? It makes no sense. Is some guy going to show up with an elevated PSA, and now this urologist in Scottsdale, Arizona is going to say, hang on a second, before I do any surgery with you, you should try the ice bath protocol, because that worked for a patient. I'll put him out of business. It doesn't make any sense. So instead, I wrote an article, like, this is what happened to my testosterone when I was doing ice baths to treat my prostate. Danny, nobody reads my articles. Like, I put it up on moroscoforge.com. Nobody cared. But then I'm going to Iceland. I was going with a girlfriend I had at the time in December. It's going to be dark. We're going to see the northern lights. So we're on this plane. I land in Reykjavik, and I got to find this rental car under like 3 feet of snow. I have the worst part of the rental car is always trying to find the car. And I have to brush off all this. And my phone, now that it's back on, it's going boop, 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 and all these signals. I get into the car, and I open up my phone in the cold, and all these people are saying, I saw you on the Joe Rogan show. I'm like, no. I think I would know if I was on Joe Rogan's podcast.
Yeah.
He read my article. He put my picture up there. And he said to David Goggins, I've been doing something different. This was December 2022. I have been doing the ice bath before I do the exercise. I've been doing this 3 days. And Goggins is like, well, how's that working? And Joe's like, it's hard, but it's working. Now, guys all over, they pause the video and they zoom in and they found my picture and they found my article. They're reading the stuff. They're trying this protocol, and they send me their labs from all over the world. So I think Joe is going cold and short for the psychological
What do you mean
preparation.
short? How long is that?
2 to 4 minutes.
Okay.
20 minutes. Joe did a 20-minute ice bath, and it was probably the most boring 20 minutes that Joe Rogan has ever posted to Instagram, because it's just him.
He filmed the whole thing?
He filmed the whole
What?
thing. Well, he had to, because the way I understand it, Jocko saw him.
At what temp?
That was 32 degrees. They're 32 and a half. That's the freezing point of water. He did his first ice bath ever. It was in a Morosco. And I guess, according to him, Jocko called him up and shamed him a little bit and saying, minute and a half, what are you doing, man? My teenage son does 20 minutes. So Joe had to set up his camera and prove to the world that he was tough enough to do 20 minutes. This is not the way to do it. Like, we all know you're tough, but if you're going to make it 20 minutes, I've never seen, a bodybuilder or a football player really tough it out. The only way to do it is to surrender and be like, that's it. I'm going to die right here. I'm at peace with the world. It's okay. I don't know really what Joe's meditation was like to get through that 20. But there was one of the kids who saw him, and she has cerebral palsy. She was 13. She did her first ice bath when she was 9. And it felt really good on her legs because she doesn't have the same sensations that you and I were having. Her mother let her do the ice bath because she was reporting how good this felt on her feet. She saw that Joe Rogan did the 20, and she said, Mom, I want to beat him. So, she got into my ice bath, and her mom was texting me. And she's like, is this okay? And I'm like, it's fine. I don't recommend 20 minutes, but it's not harmful.
Right.
You'd have to go for like an hour for hypothermia to really set in. She goes, well, it's been 20 minutes. She just beat Joe. Should I get her out? And I'm like, kids know when to get out. Turns out this child, super competitive. Like, even though she knows that she has, she's one of the special needs kids at school, she doesn't want anybody to notice. Like, she has overcome. The doctor said she might never walk. Now she's running around because she has a very strong will. 25 minutes. She looks okay, but I don't know. I'm really worried. She's fine. She'll know when to come out. 28 minutes. I feel like maybe I should take her out. I'm like, I don't know. I don't want to be the one to, you're the mom, she's the kid. I'm not there. 30 minutes. Get her the hell out of there. Like, what is she thinking? She could barely walk, because one of the things that will happen if you stay in too long, you lose dexterity. You lose motor control. Now, that's not dangerous. You just shouldn't be driving a car or a forklift or anything. Now you need rewarming. Well, fortunately, I live in Phoenix, Arizona, so I have overdone it a couple of times. If I'm trying to impress a girl, or if I'm shooting an Instagram video or something like that, I've done as much as 22 minutes. And then I have no, my brain fog sets in. I have no motor control. I can't. The answer is rewarming. If you find yourself in a situation where you've overdosed the cold, get some red light, get a sauna, wrap yourself up in a blanket, rewarm. In her case, I said, put her in the car. In Phoenix, Arizona, you park a car in the sun in the parking lot. It's going to be up to 180 degrees before you know it, right? Just do a car sauna. You can crank up the heat. You can go for a little drive if you want. She rewarmed. Good rule of thumb is 2 minutes of rewarming for every minute that you were in there. So that would be an hour, and that's fine. And now she has an experience. She can tell her schoolmates about how, she beat Joe Rogan. I hope she never does that again.
Good Lord.
Right.
That's crazy.
So when I say cold and short, 2 to 4 minutes. I mean, that's all. I'm in there like 2-3 minutes a day. Sometimes I'll do twice a day, but I don't. Every once in a while, I'll be shooting a video, and people on Instagram will say, "How does he do that? I can barely put 2 words together." And the fact is, I'm not that great at it. Sometimes I need like 3 takes. You're not seeing when I screwed up.
Yeah.
And I'll be in there for 8 or 9 minutes so we can get the take right. Then I'll have to go out in the parking lot with the kettlebells. I'll have to get some exercise. I'll have to rewarm. It'll take me half an hour. There's no long-term ill effects, but one of the safety protocols that we publish at Morosco is give yourself time to rewarm before you do anything that requires dexterity.
So when did this stuff become popular? Like, when did it hit the mainstream? Because I want to say the first time I ever heard about doing this was maybe like 2010, 2009.
You were years ahead of me.
But like, it wasn't on podcasts. I would see it like, in sports documentaries, things like this. And I had never even thought about, trying to do it for my own benefit. Obviously,
you're not the quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Why would you be doing it?
Right. And then, eventually, sometimes you see like Instagram videos of NFL players like in the locker room going in the cold water after a game or something like that.
The hockey guys are the most ridiculous. They'll like jump right in there in their uniform and stuff, but they're all Canadian. So I suppose they're used to the cold.
Yes. Well, we have some of the best hockey teams in Florida too.
I know. I noticed
ironically.
That.
Yeah. But so like at what year and why did it really start to take off in like the mainstream?
So I think Wim Hof, swimming under the ice and running marathons through Finland and stuff, he did a lot to popularize it. And then Scott Carney wrote a book called What Doesn't Kill Us. And it was the first real popular journalistic account of what Wim Hof was doing. Scott prides himself on debunking grifters and charlatans. And so Scott went to Poland with Wim Hof, and he's like, I'm going to tell the whole world what a criminal this guy is, Scott goes through the whole program. He winds up climbing Mount Kilimanjaro shirtless and in shorts. And they don't have to stop for elevation sickness or anything like this. Wow. So Scott and Wim become friends, and Scott becomes a true believer. He's like, what Wim Hof is doing is medically verified. He's been in the labs in the Netherlands. They've drawn his blood and they've measured all his body. He's got a twin brother. He's been compared to his twin brother. So we're talking genetically identical. And there are things Wim Hof can do that his twin brother can't do.
Interesting.
Great. The book becomes a bestseller. And I think that put Wim on a lot of sort of the podcast sort of circuit. Huberman starts his podcast and he grows explosively. He's a big fan of cold plunge. So I don't think it was like one moment unless it was Joe Rogan's first post, where he'd had Michaela Peterson, he'd had Kevin Hart, he'd had Wim Hof, he'd had Ben Greenfield on his podcast. And he's asking all these people, I've been hearing about this cold. He told Wim, I've been dodging the cold my whole life. I don't want to get in there. But we heard through Brigham Bueller, who's a customer, he runs
Brigham's
Ways to
great.
Well.
I love
Brigham
Brigham.
is fantastic. The world needs more people like Brigham as far as I'm concerned. And he heard, or we heard, that Joe was probably ready for an ice bath. He wanted to give this a shot. So I called Brigham up and I said, look, if Joe's going to do it, I want him to do it in a Morosco. Brigham's like, all right, maybe we can set this up. We sent Joe one. It's in his backyard. And he said, all right, this is the day. He live streams it on Instagram. He gets in and he's like, dang, there's a lot of ice in this ice bath. You know, he has this sort of epiphany experience. And everything changed in like the whole industry. There were maybe one ice bath company and 2 cold plunge companies in the United States at the time. Now you can't like Google cold for anything without getting ads from 36 different Chinese-made cold plunge companies inundating this market. It is full of deceptive marketing practices and charlatans who all wanted to kind of climb onto the social media trend that Rogan and Huberman were really pushing. Even Carney has flipped. Now he's a terrible critic of Wim Hof. He's gone after Huberman. He's gone after Soberg. He's gone after a lot of people who are talking about the health benefits, which he wrote books about, and is saying, well, nope, that's not good science. That's all exaggerated. And there's a lot more
This is the guy, I
against.
think it's clicking for me now. This is the guy who basically, he has the YouTube channel and he basically like exposes stuff or like.
He loves that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's his thing. And I mean, I don't want to say he's bad at it. He's got a number of books, but he's getting more clicks on YouTube now for bashing cold plunge, bashing brown fat, bashing the scientists than he was when he was promoting it. Now, if you're a journalist, you got to live on book sales and clicks, as you know. And so he's doing what's popular, and he's left the science behind because the audience doesn't really want to hear it. There's even Joe and Andrew Huberman won't talk so much about cold plunge anymore. However, I wrote the frickin' book. I've got 600 scientific citations in that uncommon cold book. So if you're curious about how to use ice baths, about the mechanisms by which ice baths or cold plunge therapy are going to benefit your health, now you don't have to follow Instagram accounts or something. You can read it for yourself.
That Susanna Soberg study, that was involving sauna and cold, right? They were combining the both, and the outcome of it was they recommended like 11 minutes per week or something like this.
Yeah,
and it was able to boost metabolism.
There's a lot of oversimplification. What she did for her dissertation, and she's published in Cell and other journals, it's very good. But it's also damn hard to make a living as a PhD faculty member in the European Union. The jobs are just not plentiful. Typically, you have to do a long postdoc, wait for somebody to die, then a faculty job will open up. And the funding sources aren't quite as good as they are in the United States. The university system isn't growing. It's a bleak career to slog it out as a faculty member in the EU. So what she has done, as far as I can tell, is make a career for herself as what she calls a thermalist. So advising people on how to use thermal contrast therapy to improve the quality of their lives. Okay. And she probably has a lot of case studies. I don't know for a fact. She blocked me years ago on Twitter because of something about, I'm not kidding you, Danny. You can look this up. Some disagreement that we had about cortisol. She goes, I measure cortisol, and then she blocked me. So I'm not counting on her to read the book or anything, but I see that her work in Cell is quite good, but it's also been oversimplified and exaggerated because that's what you need to do if you're going to make a living through social media or coaching people.
Right.
I don't think that you really have a choice in the matter. And I'm not calling it dumb it down. I mean, simplify it and exaggerate it. So let's talk about that study in Cell. Her dissertation is essentially in using PET scanning to identify brown fat.
Okay.
You go back 15, 20 years, medical doctors were convinced there was no such thing as brown fat in the adult human body. Infants have it, but they thought the human beings all grow out of it. And I said earlier, 95% of the people tested don't have it. But the Swedes discovered brown fat in people who were continuously exposed to cold. These were typically cancer patients that would come in to have their tumor scanned, and they say, hey, what else is showing up on the scan? It was brown fat. Now you can do
Why cancer patients?
Because the way PET scanning works, you inject a radioactive form of glucose. This travels through the body. Now, cancer cells will preferentially metabolize glucose. So this radioactive tracer gets sucked up into the tumor cells. They will then, bypassing the mitochondria, use that glucose to produce ATP and proliferate. So if they want to image your tumor, they give you this radioactive tracer glucose. It shows up on the positron emission tomography scan.
Because the tumors suck it up.
You got it. Right. So that's a concentration of this
tumors
radioactive
thrive
tracer.
on glucose.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing. These instruments are very large. They can run hot. Sometimes you have to keep the instrument room cool just for the instrument. And in some cases, it's cold enough for the patient, who's wearing one of those stupid gowns to get active brown fat going. And so in a few scans, these Swedish researchers saw symmetrical depots that would show up. And they said, that must be brown fat. Nobody believed them until someone at the Sloan Kettering Institute in New York said, I'll show those guys. I've got 10,000 PET scans. I'm going to look at them at all.
Yeah.
95% of them, no detectable brown fat. But 5% of them showed exactly those symmetrical depots, and those Swedish researchers were proven right. There is brown fat in adult human beings who practice regular cold exposure. So by the time Susanna, and I don't know her, I haven't talked to her, but by the time that she's in her graduate program, you can do a whole PhD on this thing. There's been an explosion of brown fat research because it's such a fascinating topic and so critical for human health. She's doing PET scans, and she says, I'm going to get these Danish winter swimmers. So these are people who jump in the fjord and they swim around for fun in Denmark. And she scans them. And she says, lo and behold, they have active brown fat. I've shown it and this is wonderful. She does a survey and she says, okay, how often do you go? How long do you stay in there? Do you also sauna and blah, blah, blah. And there's a whole variety of responses, as you might imagine. So she averages them out. And she says, of the Danish winter swimmers surveyed, they do an average of 11 minutes a week. Now, if you're going to oversimplify and exaggerate this, then you'll go on the Huberman podcast and you'll say, 11 minutes a week, that's all you need. That's the dose that you should have. But we don't know that. It could be that there's a minimum effective dose that is less.
Sure.
Nobody's ever really done the comprehensive study. What we do know is that these people did on average 11 minutes and they all had brown fat. Maybe you could do 5. But, a PET scan is not something you want to sign up for.
And where did Huberman get this? And you might have already told, I don't remember if you told me this on the podcast or before we started, but where did Huberman get this idea of ending on cold?
That's a metabolic recommendation.
Okay.
When you're somebody studying brown fat, you're all about the metabolism. You're saying, what would cause the brown fat to, suck up glucose or triglycerides or fatty acids from the bloodstream? How would it be active? What kind of calories are burned in the brown fat? What's the effect of brown fat on the metabolism? If what you're doing is going to the cold plunge because you want to maximize the function of your brown fat, finish on cold and have your body rewarm itself using its own thermogenic mechanisms. So from the perspective of a brown fat scientist, finishing on cold makes all kinds of sense. You're going to get the most brown fat activity. If you go straight into the sauna after you do the cold, then it's kind of like you're giving your brown fat a break. There could be great reasons for it. The ice bath is vasoconstriction. So this is smooth muscle tissue closing off the blood vessels that supply blood to your extremities. This is to protect your core body temperature against the cold. Your limbs will get cold, but your core stays warm.
Your organs, your internal organs suck up all the blood to stay alive.
You got it. It'll go into your head because usually your head is not, submerged in the ice bath. This is good for perfusion in the brain. Vasoconstriction is like a workout for your smooth muscle tissue. Then you might say, and then I want to go into the sauna. I want to get that vasodilation when I'm sweating, and this will be good for my vasculature, which it is. The end on cold when you're doing thermal contrast therapy is a metabolic recommendation. Maybe metabolism isn't what you're in there for. Maybe you're getting in there for psychological reasons. Maybe you're using the cold not so much to recruit brown fat. You're not worried about losing weight. Maybe you're doing it for other reasons. And in that case, there's no reason to end on cold. What you and I did this morning was kind of flip your usual routine. We did cold, we did exercise, we did sauna, and then we just did like a little micro dose of cold for the energy boost, right?
I do it for only the energy boost. That's the only reason I do it for.
That's cool. And it seems like it's working.
So would that hinder the energy boost if you go in the sauna after?
You tell me. Give it a shot and see whether you feel that dopamine rush that you get is wearing off.
Well, I feel great right now.
I feel pretty
Today's my first day trying it with the sauna at the end.
The reason you do it at the end is because there's really good research on using sauna for recovery from strenuous exercise. So if you do a hard workout, Huberman has told us this and he's right. Do not do an ice bath after a hard workout.
Right.
You will blunt the inflammation. You will reduce the hypertrophy. Yeah. If you're going for muscle growth, then wait at least 4 hours, he says, right? Well, and that's fine. If you do the cold before your workout, you will speed your recovery, boost your testosterone without delaying or blunting that hypertrophy. Yeah. And this is a remarkable finding that is partly coming out of Craig Heller and is substantiated by other sources. Do your cold first, then do your exercise, and you'll get a testosterone.
And you can lift way more, and you have way more endurance.
Yeah.
Do you ever get headaches when you dip your head under at like 33 degrees?
People report to me that they do.
That's happened to me once.
Yeah.
I had a headache for like a week.
So there's two things about headaches in the cold. Headaches can be associated with metabolic dysfunction. So somebody getting migraines might start a cold plunge practice, improve perfusion in the brain, improve their metabolism, and find that it helps their headaches. But somebody else getting into the cold might force blood up into the brain, increase the pressure up there, and make their headaches worse. There's a trend of people just dipping their face in the water because somebody says, oh, you get all the benefits of cold plunge, and that's a bunch of nonsense. You will get the dive reflex, which is one of the benefits of cold plunge.
Yeah.
But you also might get the headache. I don't recommend ice baths for headaches. I have a different recommendation for that. I brought it down. I'm glad you asked because I want to show you what's called the migraine lamp.
Migraine?
It's green light therapy for headaches. So I'm going to shine this on my eyes because you use it like this. If you're in a therapeutic setting, you would set it on like a little cell phone stand. You'd put it in front of you. You'd close your eyes and you would let the green light come through your closed eyelids. Nobody knows why this works, but it works. I was on Mark Bell's podcast and his producer, Andrew, he's had migraines ever since he was a kid. And so he asked me about it. The invention was kind of accidental because I had a girlfriend with migraine headaches and I was looking at red light and UV and phototherapy. And I think Google must have known that I was doing this library search and, it's, hey, maybe you're going to like this one or something because they watch my every move,
That's odd.
Yeah, right? And it was about green light and photophobia for people who suffer from migraines. When you have a migraine, most migraineurs want total darkness because the light will make their headache worse. So they shut themselves in a closet or in a dark bedroom or something. It's terrible. But at Harvard, they tested all the wavelengths of light and they found that green had a pain relieving or analgesic effect. University of Arizona picks this up and they start making devices with just green LEDs in them for migraineurs to use, and they get a significant reduction in the frequency and severity of migraine headaches among those people who used green light phototherapy. The mechanisms remain a mystery, but I'm reading about this and I'm like, oh, I go to a friend of mine, this is just a red light box, and I say, could you make this, with green LEDs in it instead? And I gave him the wavelengths that I wanted. And sure enough, the prototype came from his manufacturer.
Wow.
And he turned it on and he was like, this is terrible. It's going to give me a headache. And he calls me up and he says, Tom, we can't market this. I said, well, I have to see it. I got to, maybe I'll figure something out. I drive out there with this woman that I'm dating at the time. She gets headaches all the time. And I'm turning this on and I'm agreeing with my buddy. And I'm like, it's awful. She says, let me see that. And she takes it out of my hand. She puts it right up against her face. She closes her eyes and she says, this feels really good. So I'm like, I think we just invented the world's most powerful green phototherapy device for pain relief.
Do you have any speculation to why it could help headaches?
I do.
Can I see it?
I'm going to get there. Yeah. I sent one to Andrew from Mark Bell's podcast just to try it out. He said it works great. Reduces his need for medication. He tried it with his wife, and his wife is not the same kind of chronic migrainer that he is. Sorry, I hit the wrong button on you.
How do I turn it on?
There's a power button, and then there's controls for all the different wavelengths that go with it, and a timer. And I might have
Did we break it?
Yeah, probably.
Oh, there we go.
I put it on I put it on the 0 dimness setting. Okay. So now you're back up to max.
Wow.
Yeah. Andrew says it's fantastic. Other people tell me the same thing.
Is it okay to look at it or no?
There's no harms that I've noticed from looking at it. But the way that it has worked best is through closed eyelids.
You can just charge it with like a normal iPhone charger.
USB charger. Yep.
Wow.
So I have a clinician in Utah uses this with his patients. He sends me case studies, post-concussion headaches, sinus headaches, stress headaches, migraine headaches, all of these relieved by green phototherapy. And you were saying, well, could we make a guess at how it works? The PhDs doing this research, they're like neurologists. I'm an engineer. I make machines. I don't understand how the optic nerve or the brain works, but I understand how forest bathing works. In Japan, they have forest bathing.
Okay.
So it's an expression that it translates this Japanese word that I forget what it is, but the English interpretation of this Japanese practice is you go into the forest maybe 4 or 5 hours a week and you bathe in the forest. Metaphorically, you don't get wet, but you're allowing the air and the light environment of the forest to be your environment.
Taking in the forest atmosphere forest bathing describes the mindful practice of immersing one's senses in a natural environment. That makes so much sense.
Shinrin Yoku, I guess, is the term that Google is telling us. Now, you probably get the point. Yeah, you go out in nature, you're going to feel better.
Right.
Everyone's had this experience.
Yeah.
Clinical trials show that you don't just feel better, you heal faster, your mood improves, your health improves in every dimension when you go out into the forest. Not only that, but if you just paint a mural of a forest on the wall of a dentist office, the patients will report lower pain readings.
Really?
Exactly. If you give a hospital patient a window, and outside their window is like a cityscape, and it's a little bit of benefit. But if you have trees outside their window, it will reduce their hospital stays because they will heal faster. So there's something about the green. Well, in the forest, there's all kinds of clean air and wonderful things, but the light environment is unique. Every shady forest throughout the world, and people have brought spectrophotometers and measured this, dominated by 2 wavelengths of light. Green, that makes sense. The leaves are all green. And near infrared. And that part doesn't really make a lot of sense. But it turns out that the trees are emitting 2 wavelengths of light that they can't really use.
Right.
Green and near infrared. One of them is visible to us and one of them is invisible. Now, if you live in Phoenix, Arizona, like I do, you don't get green. There's no green. A palm tree is not a shady forest. So you are removed from that forest bathing environment. You got to drive 2 hours up to Payson or Flagstaff or something like that if you want to find the forest in Arizona. It's beautiful up there, but I don't have all day for this. The theory is that we can bring the green light of the forest, which I am in deficit of because I live in Phoenix. We can bring it into my home. We can bring it into my eyes. And then we can give me one of the benefits of forest bathing. That is the light environment of the forest in my apartment in a high rise in Phoenix. Wow. That doesn't say how or why it works, but that is kind of a naturalistic explanation for us to investigate.
That's fascinating.
It sure is.
All of the baby formulas in the US, it's impossible to find them that don't have seed oils in them. So like with our first kid, we were looking to buy baby formula, and my wife had to order the baby formula from Germany. Yeah. Because the same company, same exact logo, everything, just you cannot buy it in the US without the seed oils in it.
When my children were little, we wanted formula. I wanted to be able to feed my kids. For me, the breastfeeding was their principal source of nutrition. But we had the formula as a backup and for whenever I was watching the kids. When it came time they were starting to grow teeth and we're going to give them some solid foods, I feel terrible about this to this day. I did what my mother told me, which was to start them on Cheerios. I should have started them on salmon. I should have started them on scrambled eggs. I should have started them on steak or high quality protein. I didn't know. At that time, I believed the nutritional lies that my mother had taught me from childhood. So there are some people out there that are sort of formula purists. I don't care what's in the formula. You shouldn't be feeding your kid formula anyway. I'm not one of those people.
Right. Some people can't produce milk naturally. That's right. They have trouble.
There's some babies with no mom. Like we need formula in this country, both for emotional, economic, and practical reasons.
Yes.
And it should be good goddamn formula. And then the babies are going to be on it for several months, which is a very short period of their whole life, but a critical period for neurological development and immunological development. So this is the brain and the immune system. During those periods of rapid development of the immune system and the brain system, if you don't get things right, you will either, like with my son, result in some atypical immunological trajectory of development that leaves him vulnerable to autoimmune disorder, in his case, type 1 diabetes. That's the immune system, which relies on vitamin D. Or in the neurological system, you will orient that child's development in some atypical function that lives them vulnerable to autism. Now, this is something that Kennedy and Bhattacharya have been talking about. It's September. We're supposed to get Kennedy's announcement about the causes of autism. And there's a lot on there about vaccines cause autism. If I put something on autism and mitochondria on Twitter, I'm going to have people push back on me and say, you're an idiot. We know it's the MMR vaccine and that's the only, or whatever it is. I'm not a vaccine advocate. I'm not a aluminum or mercury advocate. These things are toxic. They're neurotoxins.
Yes.
They would certainly result in neurological damage, especially to a child that's on the edge. But they are not the origin of autism. It is that late stage pregnancy and the first several months to 2 years of life in which the brain and the nervous system is developing more rapidly than at any other stage, in which the metabolic state of the mother and the child is critically important. Metabolism, it has two components. There's what's happening in the gut. The gut produces everything that goes into the bloodstream that feeds the mitochondria. That includes glucose, it includes free fatty acids. So the mitochondria are downstream of the gut. And if the mitochondria aren't in a healthy state, because it is the mitochondria that guide the development of the brain, impaired mitochondrial function will lead to atypical neurological development. Just like my son was vulnerable to the onset of type 1 diabetes because he didn't get enough vitamin D. If the mitochondria of the mother or the child are impaired during those critical stages of development, they become vulnerable to neurological regression. So this is the child speaking words, making good eye contact, they're social, but then they experience a fever. The fever causes inflammation in the brain, and this tips them into neurological regression. In other words, they have a fragile neurological system because their mitochondria were impaired during its development. Even if you fix the mitochondria later in life, the development of the brain can still be vulnerable to the onset of autism. You give a vaccine. Now, the vaccine increases the toxic load on the mitochondria. It's absolutely true. Get the aluminum, for example, the hell out of the vaccines.
Well, they say that it can't, with the thimerosal, the vaccine can't even be stored without the thimerosal, right? Like the
Oops.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
Right.
maybe we'll come up with some other way for the children to get chicken pox.
Right.
Like it makes me a little angry.
Yeah.
But I'm not making a vaccine specialist argument. What I'm saying is that children will often have fevers in response to a vaccine. This is a normal sort of vaccine response. It's not even counted as vaccine injury.
Right.
It's an immunological activation that creates a fever in the child. That fever is associated with swelling in the brain. That fever can be the onset of neurological regression. Now, the experience of the parent is, I had a perfectly healthy child. I went in for one of those bogus well child visits. They loaded up my kid with vaccines. 24 hours later, he's banging his head, he's spinning, and he can't speak.
Yeah.
How you cannot tell that parent anything but the vaccine caused the child's autism. That is their experience, and I'm not contradicting it, but their child was made vulnerable to that vaccine injury by impaired mitochondrial function earlier in the child's life. So what am I saying? We must take care of the metabolism of pregnant women. The most important factor that will modify or increase the risk of autism later in the child is the metabolic state of the mother during pregnancy. If her metabolism is impaired, the child's neurological system, it will not develop in a typical and healthy way. It will become more vulnerable to other toxins. So one of the things that Kennedy put was there's an association between Tylenol use and autism, and there absolutely is. The evidence is very strong. Whoa. There's also an association between ibuprofen and autism. What do you give a child when they have a fever in response to a vaccine injury or anything else? You give them Tylenol. It's not the Tylenol, and Tylenol is not good for young kids. It's toxic to the liver. It's not good at all, and you should especially not give it to infants or young children. But the reason the parent is giving the Tylenol is because they have the fever and the brain inflammation. So we need to look deeper than just the superficial causes. Autism originates...
Tylenol specifically, or is it any other medication similar to that?
So the data
like
that
ibuprofen,
I saw,
Tylenol, Motrin?
all of them are associated with an increased risk or frequency of autism diagnoses. Now, Tylenol popped up, and I forget, this is Dr. Walker's research, if I'm remembering the name correctly. Tylenol popped up as higher than ibuprofen, but both of them were associated with elevated risk. That's not a mechanism. And again, Tylenol has side effects that make it dangerous, especially for young children. But it's the reason that you're giving the Tylenol that you really have to look at for the origins of autism. It is in, and I have a good interview with Dr. Richard Fry on this, it is in mitochondrial dysfunction. The mitochondria are responsible for forming and pruning the neural connections in the brain. If the mitochondria are impaired, the brain doesn't go right. And so we'll see what Kennedy and Bhattacharya say later this month. I know they're aware of the mitochondrial theory of autism, and we'll see how much that plays in. What is one of the best things that a pregnant woman can do to heal her mitochondria, to boost her metabolism? Get in the cold plunge. There are a number of women who have written to me and practiced this, had excellent birth outcomes. There's good epidemiological data on cold exposure during pregnancy and improved birth outcomes. So it's a wonderful thing, especially late stage in pregnancy. If you can't exercise, you can't fix your diet, your sleep is disrupted by your pregnancy, you can at least get into the ice bath for 2 minutes. Inflammation will go down, mobility will go up, sleep quality will improve, and mitochondrial function will improve.
The insurance company should legally not be allowed to incentivize their doctors to inject these experimental drugs into children for thousands of dollars. That
Danny, here's a big problem in the United States. This dates back to like 1922 or something. Don't quote me on the year, but it is when the Dodge brothers decided to sue Henry Ford. The Dodge brothers were invested in Henry Ford's automobile company. And I'm going to bring this back to pharmaceuticals, but bear with me. This case went all the way up to the Supreme Court because Henry Ford did not want to pay the Dodge brothers or any of his shareholders a dividend. He said, I'm going to take the money that we're making, I'm going to reinvest it in making the product better, the working conditions better, better, the vehicles safer, and the factory more productive. And the Dodge brothers said, screw you, we want a dividend. All the way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court says that whomever is running the publicly traded company has a legal obligation to maximize shareholder value.
Right.
This is not a moral principle anymore. This is a legal principle. So now you take the chief executives at Pfizer.
What was the name of that case again?
It was Dodge Brothers versus Ford.
Dodge Brothers versus
and
Ford.
You can look it up, a Supreme Court decision, maximize shareholder value, and you will get the right case, so you don't have to take my word for it. Since the early 20s, every executive of every U.S. publicly traded company is legally obliged to operate the company as if he was maximizing shareholder value. Now, a guy like Steve Jobs didn't give a damn about shareholder value. He never paid a dividend, didn't have a stock buyback or anything because he was so, I guess, obstreperous or something, But as soon as Jobs died, what did Tim Cook do? He started paying a dividend and he started shareholder buybacks. Jobs felt like if you're using your cash to return to investors, it's because you don't have any more good ideas to invest in. But he was an iconoclast. The executives of the pharmaceutical companies in the United States, they are organized as C Corps. They are legally obliged to maximize shareholder value. They are not legally obliged to maximize shareholder value unless you make some people sick. If it comes down to whether they would put patient welfare and well-being first or put shareholder value first. They have a legit argument to say, I am obliged by the Supreme Court of the United States to maximize shareholder value, even if it comes at the expense of patients. As long as it's been approved by the FDA and I'm within the regulatory requirements, I have no flexibility. That is a bullshit reason to poison people, make them sick, to create people who are lifetime dependent upon your project. I'm not defending it on a moral or ethical basis. What I'm saying is we have a systemic problem with for-profit healthcare in the United States, and we cannot rely upon the pharmaceutical companies to fix it. We can't shame the pharmaceutical companies into behaving better. What we need to do is, get them off the airwaves. They're the biggest advertisers, so of course they own the mainstream media channels. So shut that down. But we also need to move them to B corporations instead of C corporations.
Yes.
A B corporation is allowed to be for profit, but it's organized for public benefit. It's not a nonprofit. It's a for-profit corporation organized for public benefit. We must remove from them this crazy-ass constraint that says for-profit healthcare is more obliged to the shareholders than it is to the patient. So that's another policy change that we can make. The idea that we could murder or shame our way to better behavior inside these publicly traded C corporations is a fantasy in the extreme. We need to reorganize the way for-profit healthcare works in the United States to change the incentive constructors and constraints under which they operate. So I'm not defending murder. I'm like real bad with that. And I'm not disagreeing with the people who are criticizing the executives who are lying, cheating, stealing moral scum in the way that they have behaved. What I'm saying is we need to operate at a higher level, a more systemic level, to dismantle the mechanisms, that is the infrastructure of healthcare in our country that has gotten us to this miserable state where life expectancy in the United States hasn't improved since like 2012.
Right. Well, it is optimistic to see. I just saw this, I think yesterday, that and maybe you can find this, Steve, to confirm it. But I saw that RFK did something where he made it so pharmaceutical advertisers now have to list every single one of the side effects on all of their ads. And that was
What was your reaction to that?
I thought that was incredible. That's a huge step in the right direction.
But I listened to these ads. And I thought they already were listing. Explosive diarrhea, instant death.
They are, but they only have to list a small percentage of them, and they can also say, go here for more details. But before, I guess, 1997, they had to do all of them. And that literally would like triple the length of their commercial.
Yeah. Okay, so the FDA recently sent out, like, I think it's more than 100 cease and desist letters to advertisers. Because of this policy change, the ads must change immediately. And I guess the FDA has said, you need to pull those ads down now because they no longer
So when did
conform.
this happen, Steve? When did this actually get implemented?
This is very recent.
Yeah.
Like, even in the time scale of podcast rules.
This is talking about what you were talking about.
No. Find the new thing.
The new thing, right? I'm still looking for it.
If you search for the FDA cease and desist letters, you'll probably find it.
Yeah, it should be like the top of the news. Like, it should be on the top of every single news site right now.
I was really happy to see that because pharmaceutical ads target patients because they work. Like, they wouldn't be spending all this frickin' money if bypassing the physician didn't work. Ask your doctor if Stifacel is right for you or whatever the hell. Mm-hmm. So this is FDA launches crackdown on deceptive drug advertising from September 9th, which was 2 days ago.
2 days ago. There we go.
And I was glad to see it.
U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Food and Drug Administration today announced sweeping reforms to rein in misleading direct-to-consumer pharmaceutical advertising. Today, the FDA is sending thousands of letters warning pharmaceutical companies to remove misleading ads and issuing approximately 100 cease and desist letters to companies with deceptive ads. In addition to enforcing existing law, the FDA is initiating rulemaking to close the adequate provision loophole. Oh, okay, that's what it was called, the adequate provision loophole created in 1997, which drug companies have used to conceal critical safety risks in broadcasting and digital ads, fueling inappropriate drug use and eroding public trust.
So this is Marty Makary is running the FDA. I think he's called the commissioner of the FDA.
Okay.
Before he was appointed, he was a Johns Hopkins professor who was vocal anti-lockdown. He's like, these lockdowns aren't helping anybody. These policies are hurting people.
Yeah.
He wrote a book called Blind Spots. And in this book, he was cataloging important medical misconceptions, things that medical doctors believe that just weren't true and needed to change. One of those was hormone replacement therapy for menopausal women. Stands out in my mind because it's related to ice baths and cold plunge and sex hormone balancing. What he did not include in there was this relationship between testosterone and prostate. Doctors used to think that elevated testosterone would increase the risk of prostate cancer.
Right.
Absolutely false.
Yep.
Dr. Abraham Morgentaler, he's down here in Florida, and he has done exhaustive work revealing that misconception. So part of what fuels or perpetuates these misconceptions, and we have reams of data that you'd think would overturn it, but part of what fuels that is two things. One is advertising to the public, these drug ads that lie to the public about what the drugs do. And the other one is called continuing education credits. That is advertising essentially to doctors, to physicians, to people who have advanced degrees and are licensed to practice, calling it continuing education to try and bring them up to speed on the latest drugs or whatever it is. These continuing education credits, which are often required to maintain licensure or status within professional societies, they're all funded by pharmaceutical companies when it comes to medicine. So there's two levels of advertising. This one that we're seeing, which it looks like Marty Makary is working with Kennedy to shut down. There's a whole nother level that we don't see, which is it is the pharmaceutical companies that are writing the textbooks. It is the pharmaceutical companies that are giving away the seminars to the medical schools. It is the pharmaceutical companies that are running the continuing education programs for physicians so that they can continue to brainwash otherwise intelligent people into thinking that something like a testosterone blocking drug would help their patient when in fact the data says increased testosterone is associated with protection against prostate cancer. So incentives are screwing up everything in medicine right now.
And there's the other hidden layer that a lot of people don't see where pharmaceutical companies are responsible for tons of content on the internet being buried and suppressed, which is another huge problem.
Depending upon which data source you cite, iatrogenic injuries, so these are medical errors or these are injuries caused by medical treatment. Iatrogenic injury is either the third or the first leading cause of death in the United States. You don't see it on the leaderboard when they say, hey, these are the top 10 leading causes of death or something like that. They always delete medical errors or iatrogenic injury. But when you include it, it either shows up number 1 or number 3, depending upon which state or which data set you believe.
What does iatrogenic mean?
So it's one of those fancy words that I had to learn because we don't learn it.
Is that a Greek word or something?
We could look up the etymology of iatrogenic.
Iatrogenic.
Yeah, I can hardly pronounce it when I'm like recording for my audiobooks. It's very embarrassing. So we can just say medical injury, and that can result from surgical
Hospitals,
errors, pharmaceutical interactions that people weren't aware of, accidental overdoses, prescribing the wrong drug to the wrong person, being unaware of medical allergies.
It's from Greek.
Physician.
From the Greek word iatros.
Producing. So iatrogenic
physician
means
or healer.
Produced by a physician.
Wow. Yeah, we were just talking about this the other day, how it's like the number 2 cause of death in the U.S.
Yep. There are hot tubs all over this country, and they feel great, but they make you sick. There's 3 things wrong with them. For the most part, you can't put minerals in them. The ocean has minerals. Every natural hot spring in the world is coming out of some ancient volcano, and it's got plenty of minerals. It's part of the salubrious effect of the health of the hot spring is the minerals in the water. But your hot tub doesn't have minerals. It's got chlorinated, fluorinated tap water. So that's one. The other one is the oxidation reduction potential. So this is some sophisticated water chemistry, but for your hot tub to stay clean, you got to put a bunch of chlorine that gives it an oxidative potential to kill the microorganisms. Every natural hot spring in the world, I might be exaggerating slightly, but when the water comes out of the volcanic ground, it is reductive. That is, it's not oxygenated. It is got a negative ORP. That means instead of stealing electrons, it's ready to donate electrons. And it's typically the sulfur sulfate redox chemistry that controls the oxidation reduction potential, or ORP, of the water. So we want to make a chlorine-free hot tub. We're using ozone. But to get that reduction, that negative ORP, you can switch it to hydrogen. So you turn the ozone off, you turn the hydrogen on. 20 minutes later, the bath is full of hydrogen. There's Epsom salt, which is a sulfate salt, other minerals in there. So we solve the mineral problem. We solve the reduction problem. And then the third thing that's wrong with hot tubs is they're not grounded. You got your acrylic, your fiberglass tub. There's no grounding anywhere, which means you have no access to the electrons from the earth. But a Morozco, we call it the hydrogen mineral bath. I don't even know what to call it, Danny, but if you look for the Morozco mineral bath, you'll find it. It's hot, 104 degrees. It has hydrogen. It's grounded, and you can put all the sulfate minerals in it that you want.
Is there a picture of it on there?
You can find it online, Steve. You go to Morozco, you go to our shop page.
Morozco hydrogen mineral bath.
Something like that. I should probably know, my own product, but go all the way over to the right. You'll see a button called shop. You hit that, and then there it is. Morozco hydrogen mineral bath.
Whoa.
The first one ships next week. It's going to Noah Syndergaard, who used to pitch for the Mets, and now he's like a big Maha guy. And so you can see it has this barrel stave look, and it looks like a boat in some ways, because you got the tub, and then you have a trunk, and you have a hood. And that's where the mechanical equipment is contained.
See, I kind of wish I had a hot tub instead of a sauna, because then you don't cook your head.
No, you don't. I'll tell you why, for 2 reasons. The first one is this thing is incredibly expensive. Like, it's in Noah's budget. He texted me and he's like, "Can't you make a hot tub?" And I said, "Well, it's been on our roadmap."
Yeah,
right. The retail price $50,000. Only
let's see some more pics.
People like Noah can do it right now. There's a video of me in the prototype. All right, so here's a customer and his wife. They came over, they got in the hot tub. You can see we have the green light in there for calming. And in that video, I start trying to explain things. But we will have better media next week because we're going to video record the crap out of our hot tub before we ship it to Noah.
And why don't I want a hot tub versus a sauna, though? I mean, I think I do.
I'm the worst salesman. Like, ever. I should be trying to talk you into this. I should say to my sales director, "Scott, we got a new lead."
Yeah.
But the sauna and the hot tub
That's amazing.
are different. When you get into the sauna, you get vasodilation.
Yeah.
The principal way that you cool your body is to sweat. And so your body will open up the blood vessels and bring the blood to the surface of your skin where the evaporation of your sweat will cool the blood. That's vasodilation via sweating. When you get into the hot tub, your body knows that you can't sweat into the water. The only parts of you that are sweating are like your head or if your arms are out. They will sweat. But there's a principle called hydromeiosis, which Google thinks is a spelling error. You know, everything that is saturated with water cannot sweat. So to defend your body from the heat in the hot tub, you will get vasoconstriction.
Really?
In the ice bath, vasoconstriction. In the hot tub, vasoconstriction. So I'll tell you why the hot tub is good. But for thermal contrast therapy, sauna, dry heat, wet, cold.
Got it.
And that will be the smooth muscle workout, maximize your cardiovascular benefits. Sounds great. Hot tubs, they're relaxing. They're good in some other ways. The whirlpool was invented by an Italian American. He was an immigrant named Jacuzzi. It's a very famous brand, right?
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. So he had a son with rheumatoid arthritis, and the kid was young. He was like 3 years old or something. I forget exactly, but he's preschool age. And he discovered that a hot bath with a whirlpool jet would give his son some relief from pain. So instead of driving 45 minutes into this hospital in Berkeley, California to get his son regular treatments, he invented the whirlpool jets so they could have hot water at home. Boom, the whole Jacuzzi brand is built upon what Jacuzzi invented to relieve his son's pain. It's a wonderful story. Well, the Jacuzzi was operating at a different time, in the 50s and the 60s. It wasn't seed oils and it wasn't like chronic oxidative stress.
Right.
The ice bath does different things in the hot tub. The ice bath revs up your metabolism. The hot tub doesn't do that. People who do regular ice baths do not suffer from chronic oxidative stress. It relieves the pain of rheumatoid arthritis. Like Jacuzzi could have done the same thing, but refrigeration is a lot harder to invent than a whirlpool pump that you put into a regular tub. People now do not get the same benefits from the hot tub as Jacuzzi's kid used to because they suffer from different health states.
Right.
If you ice bath all the time, you don't suffer from those conditions. But not everybody's going to get into an ice bath. Like your wife, who hopefully your son is going to talk her into it, right? But a lot of women out there are like, you'll never catch me in one of those things. Those people can get many of the same benefits, that is relief from chronic oxidative stress, reduction of inflammation, in a hot tub, as long as the hot tub is grounded. The minerals are great. They feel good. They're good for muscle soreness, and has hydrogen. So I disagree with Gary Brecka on some things. I think he's exaggerating when he says, hydrogen therapy is the single most underrated biohack that anybody can do. But that doesn't mean he's wrong. There are benefits to hydrogen therapy. When you get into a hot tub with hydrogen bubbles in it, that hydrogen will be absorbed through your skin. It will relieve chronic oxidative stress. For those people who can't ice bath, boom, hydrogen bath is the way to go. And the best way to do that is in the heat. We might come out with a hydrogen oxygen for cold tub just because, if Brecka's going to keep talking about it, people are going to buy it. But I can't get behind like this super health benefit.
Yeah.